Well, it's 10:04. We will go ahead and get started. I want to introduce our presenter today. Her name is Jessica Warren. She is the South Central Kansas Mobility Manager, and she's here to present on empowering riders. So without further ado, Jessica, take it away. Oh, and one other note, while she's presenting, if everyone could go ahead and mute and turn off their cameras, that'd be appreciated. Thanks.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Greg. I appreciate the invitation to be able to talk to you all. Let me just get to full screen real quick. Okay, so like Greg said, this presentation is just going to be a quick presentation on empowering riders. And I am the mobility manager for South Central Kansas. And I have a map of what exactly counties I have that I'll show you here in a few minutes. What we're going to go over is just the basics of what mobility management is. I'm sure Michelle has mentioned it, so I won't go too deep into it. And then the importance of mobility, why transit could be scary, how to empower people, and then we'll talk about some local resources and Kansas resources. So mobility management, I'm not going to read what's on the screen, but basically it is figuring out how to create resources and how to connect people to those resources, specifically for people who are vulnerable or don't have access to transportation. So that could be people with developmental or intellectual disabilities or disabilities in general. It could be older people and people who have low income. So it can be working individually with people or more on a systems level. What I do in my region right now is more on a systems level. My position is brand new in my area. I'm hitting like the 6-month mark, I think next week actually. So what we're focusing on right now in my area is connecting systems to each other. There's a lot of transportation systems in my area. So figuring out how to just make things more efficient and connect them is really one of the big tasks that I personally have. Mobility management looks different everywhere. For me, it looks different between agencies for different people. There are 4 mobility managers in the state right now. Michelle is one of, she's the original actually. So we also work to connect to each other. That's kind of one of the big long-term goals. And Michelle's region looks different than my region. The other 2 mobility managers are both named Mike. Their areas both look different. So we really try and make things as personalized and individualized as we possibly can. So a little bit more about me and my area. So I am in Wichita. I'm in the 9 with the kind of lime green around it in the bottom. I'm personally housed out of Wichita, but I have Harvey, Sedgwick, Butler, Cowley, Sumner, Harper, and Kingman counties. So I travel to all those counties. I work with all the resources. There's 25-ish transportation providers, and that doesn't include cab companies or private companies. So my background specifically is in social work. Transit is a brand new realm for me. I've worked with people who are vulnerable. They fall into the population that we really want to focus on. I have worked, I spent probably about 5 years in the trauma field. I've worked with people who have been sexually assaulted. I worked with foster care kids. I worked with homeless and runaway youth. So a lot of the issues that we're looking to address and connect people to resources for are people that I've worked with, and that experience kind of lends me a different perspective on transportation. So that is just a little bit about me and where my perspective is when I'm presenting this. So the importance of mobility. I think that's something that we often don't think about, especially for those of us who may have been privileged enough to never have been away from mobility. So what I mean by that is if you've always had a car, if growing up your parents had at least one vehicle, If you were able to get to school easily, if you could go to the grocery store, then you always have mobility as an option. But there are people out there who don't. People who have never been able to drive, who don't have access to transportation in any way, shape, or form, can't afford their own vehicle, things like that. So mobility connects us to all of these things. It gives us independence, it gives us access to healthcare, and it alleviates social isolation. So at the bottom, I put mobility equals opportunity for higher quality of life. And I don't know about you all, but whenever I have car issues, I completely break down. If I don't go to Sonic like 3 times a week, then I'm so sad. Or if I can't go to Target, things like that, it just kind of decreases my quality of life. And then I become more of a hermit than I already am. So if you kind of step outside of your norm and think about what it would be like if you didn't have access to your personal vehicle in your own life, what would that look like? I personally live in Wichita, so there is a bus stop about a block away for me. But for people in more rural areas who don't have access to that, they might not know what the resources are, or they might not be able to connect to anyone. So they might have to rely on friends or family. And that usually only goes so far. Mobility connects you to your jobs, and your job helps pay for your entire life. Helps pay rent, food, if you need childcare, things like that. So we really want to stress the importance of mobility and how it truly improves quality of life. And to that third point I have on there, the alleviates social isolation. Research studies have found that older adults who experience social isolation are more likely to experience very critical health issues. So social isolation is also a health issue, especially in older adults, and mobility can address that. So why are some reasons you think public transit might be scary? And I just listed a few things that just kind of popped into my head. I recently was in St. Louis for the first time, and I rode their light rail, their metro line. And I work in transit, and it was still a little scary, a little confusing for me. So if there's someone who has never been on transit before, there are a lot of things that are really, truly terrifying. So one of the things is route planning. I will talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. A big reason is unpredictability. When you're riding with a stranger, you don't know what things are going to look like. You don't know who else they're going to pick up. You don't know what the route's going to look like that day. You don't know the driver, so you don't know if they have any biases against you based on your age, race, disability, social status, anything. And then you also don't know what the wait time will be. A lot of times you'll get, if it's like a service that goes directly to your door or your curb, then you'll get kind of a pickup window. So you don't know where in that window your ride will come. And then say you're going to the doctor, they'll drop you off at the doctor, but generally they won't wait for you. So you have to call them back and they'll give you another pickup time. So you have to wait there at the doctor's office and then you get to go home. So there's a lot of unpredictability. A lot of times, like I said, you don't know who else is going to get on that vehicle with you or get in that vehicle with you. So it can be a little scary at times. And then you also don't know your accessibility options. So for people who may need like a lift for a wheelchair or space for a mobility device, or who might be deaf, you just don't know what those options will look like and if that particular provider will be able to help you in the way that you think you need help, or in the way that you do need help or feel that you need help. So transit can be truly, truly terrifying. An example of that, this is the route map for Wichita Transit. And most people here, especially here in Kansas, won't have to deal with this particular issue. But I live in Wichita, I work in transit, and it's hard to see where these buses are going. You have to figure out connecting points to get from one side to the other. There are some routes in particularly vulnerable areas that only stop 4 times a week. So you have to know exactly when those stops are so that you don't get stuck in that area if you're going there, or if you need to get back into that area, you have to know where your connecting buses are. So this is just an example of why transit's scary. I mean, if you knew nothing about riding a bus and you saw this map, you'd probably feel very overwhelmed for a lot of people. And then if you throw in any sort of disability or illness, or just someone having a very stressful day, then that just adds to the confusion. And like I said, most of the rural providers don't offer this option, and most of Kansas won't experience something like this, but it is, I feel like it's a good visual example. So empowerment. Like I said, I come from a social work background. So empowerment is something we talk about a lot, but I think it's something that it's kind of simple to process, but it's hard to conceptualize when you're actually working with someone. So for me, I put it in bold, but knowledge is power. So empowerment is giving power to someone to be able to do something within their lives, to be more independent and take control of their lives. So one of the big things is giving them power by giving them knowledge. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. But one of the big things is listen. And don't just listen to respond, but listen to hear. So when someone is telling you they have an issue, just make sure you listen, and listen for the underlying things. There are a lot of times where people can't fully articulate what they are trying to say. And so you kind of have to look into the deeper issues. They might say they have one issue with transit, but really the issue that's bothering them is deeper and they just don't have words for it. Another big thing is when you're teaching someone something, teaching them using multiple methods. We all learn in different ways. Some people learn by hearing, some people learn by seeing, and other people learn by walking through something. But generally, most people learn by various methods. So you might, when you teach someone something, you might want to like go through a presentation like this where they have visuals and they can hear it, and then walk through it with them later. And that is especially important in transit. I know one of the things that many mobility managers do, I'm not quite there yet, but many mobility managers do what's called travel training. Excuse me. And that is where you help someone figure out where they want to go and how to get there. So you teach them, you walk them through that process, and then you ride with them on that service to help them be more comfortable once or twice. It's also important to remember that sometimes it takes a couple times for things to stick. Different people learn at different speeds. So it might seem like it sticks one day, and then the other day they call you back and they're like, hey, I don't know what this is. So that's something, just remember, don't get frustrated. That's just kind of how the brain works. Not everything sticks. If it did, our brains would just be so overwhelmed. We're bombarded with information all the time. So it makes sense that some things just won't stick. And another big part of empowering someone is being honest about what you don't know. If you say, oh yeah, I know that, and then you give them false information, it's going to immediately erode their trust in you, and they won't trust anything that you say. But if someone asks you and you're like, I don't actually know that answer, but let's figure out together, or let me check that, things like that. One of my biggest things is when someone asks me a question and I don't know, I'm just like, hey, let's Google it together and see what we can figure out. And then we process through it that way. Honestly, anyone who's familiar with social work knows that Google is probably the biggest tool. So that is something to just remember. It is more authentic and more honest and better for teaching to just be honest about what you do and what you don't know, and reach out for resources when needed. And then it's also important for you yourself to have diversity, equity, and inclusion training, and to include that when you teach with someone. So what that means is know about different illnesses, know about different cultures, know about the issues that face different people based on any of their different potential oppressions that they might have, and then have training on how to include people. So a very simple thing on including people and being familiar with diversity is, let's see, an example that always kind of pops into my mind is many Middle Eastern countries. It is very impolite to have direct eye contact. And me personally, I feel like I want to stare into your soul. So that's something that when I work with someone from that population, I have to tone back and kind of look away and look out the windows and things like that. So just knowing very simple things like that makes someone feel much more welcome and open, and then they're much more likely to learn from what you're saying. And then self-advocacy. Again, knowledge is power. So if you teach people the information, then they're more likely to be able to do things on their own to some degree. I know not everyone will ever be fully independent. Everyone has different levels of what independence looks like. So teaching people to advocate for themselves in the capacity that they have is very important. So that's, again, teaching them resources. That's teaching them to know when something might be a little off and to ask questions. And that's teaching them to be honest about what they don't know, and to, again, ask questions. So the link I have put below is some videos, and I'll make sure you guys get this link as well, but I'm going to flip on over so you can see what this page looks like. So this is travel training videos, actually from North Carolina, so not everything is applicable. But these are some things that you could learn and some things that you could watch and see what could be applicable for your area. So there's basic things like what travel training looks like in their area, what ADA route planning looks like, what overcoming obstacles is, which I think is a great one to share with everyone. And then there's a few others. There's some in Spanish, and then there's a few more. How to ride, I think, was one that was very valuable. But again, that one was specific for this program in North Carolina. Oh, nope, not from beginning. Okay, so again, just give people knowledge. This little infographic I have has leadership, motivation, mentoring, skills, achievement, and training. So it is kind of a cycle. You teach someone something, you give them skills, and then kind of walk them through this whole process. You mentor them, and then you celebrate achievements. That's something that I didn't write down on the slide, but it is important. Whatever progress looks for that person, you want to celebrate it. You want to, give them a pat on the back or, a round of applause, whatever that looks like. For the youth that I worked with, giving them a piece of candy was always huge. And, candy's cheap. Just give them a piece of candy and they'd be very happy. And it's just very simple things. But you do want to celebrate successes as well. That's always a part of empowerment. And you don't want to tear anyone down. That's very antithetical to building someone up, because empowerment really is about building someone up and giving them the power to deal with their issues in their lives. So switching gears a little bit, I wanted to talk about different resources. And the Neosho County Transportation was one that I feel, from what I've seen, is very typical of what a lot of rural transportation looks like. So they actually serve like 3 different counties, I believe, and I have the website I can pull up here in a minute. But their general public transportation is what's called demand response. So if you're not familiar with that, you call, and if you call within generally 24 hours, they can do their best to pick you up and take you to a location. So they operate Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 2. And they do say that they don't do same-day rides, which makes sense when you're doing a whole county. I'll switch over to their website real quick. So they operate in Crawford County. Can you still see my screen?
No, we lost your screen there, Jessica.
I clicked the wrong thing. I apologize.
No worries.
Okay, so it should be back up now.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, perfect. So this particular company operates public transportation in Crawford County, Neosho County, Pittsburgh. And then they also have a fixed route bus service, I believe in Pittsburgh. Yes, so these are their schedules, things like that. So this is pretty typical of what public transportation looks like in rural Kansas. So what's not typical is that they have donations. They're donation-based riders. So their suggested donations are $1 for each trip. I've seen other places where it's $2 to $4, and that's not suggested. That's just what their price is. So it really depends on each area, and it really depends on what you are able to figure out. So we'll go back to the slideshow. So more of what Kansas looks like is on the Kansas Rides website. This is operated by the mobility managers. So Michelle and I and the 2 Mikes in Manhattan and Topeka, and any other mobility managers that we get hired on. So just kind of a basic overview. Kansas Rides is a one-stop shop to learn as much about transportation as you can. We have all the resources. Our goal is to promote independence, build connections, and preserve Kansas living. So I'll just walk you through the website real quick, so you can kind of get a view. So when you click into the website, this is what it looks like. We have a scrolling bar that has different information. Masks are required on public transportation right now, so we just have that. And then just a few more basic information things. The big thing that I do want to draw your attention to is this I need a ride section up top. It is also here on the sides as well of every page. So when you go to I need a ride, you are taken to this map that I showed you earlier. But when you look at it on the website, you can click on any county and see what the resources are in that particular county. So things that you want to look for, this one is a great example. It has kind of everything. So Arrowhead West, their clientele is people with disabilities. And generally when it says people with disabilities, you want to dig a little bit further into what that means. Some agencies only serve the people, only transport the people that they serve. And then you have elderly and disabled, and then the general public. So these are just the little goals to look for, the little tips and tricks to look for. And then you can click into their specific information to learn more. So this is for every county. There are some counties that don't have resources attached to them, and that's likely because there's not public transportation in every county. But for the most part, there is in every county. For example, I work out of Sedgwick County, so you can see all the different resources. A lot of these only serve their own clients, but this is a really great resource if you're looking for public transportation options. So I will go back to my slides. Like I said, the mobility managers keep up with that. And we also on our website have links to our social media, and we post on those. Those are geared more towards riders to give basic information, but we do have transportation providers who follow that as well. So that's just kind of a basic way of finding the resources. And then on the website, if you have any more specific questions, it has contact information for all 4 of the mobility managers, and it has our pictures as well. So for someone who may be a little anxious about working with someone they don't know, a picture sometimes helps. So if you ever have any questions about any resources, you can contact any of us and we'll do our best. Even if we don't work in your area, we'll still do our best to connect you with resources or with that person. We serve all of Kansas. That's our goal. We don't just serve the 7 counties or the 8 counties or whatever that looks like. I apologize. My dog is shaking her neck. So we don't just serve our like one specific area. We do serve all of the state. So with that, I will open it up to questions. I have put my contact information here. And then you also do have Michelle Griffin, who is a great resource for mobility management. So if you ever have any questions, like I said, you can contact me or her or the Mikes, which you can find their contact information on the website as well.
Okay, thank you so much, Jessica. I appreciate you coming out and presenting this to us. It's some really good information. Does anyone have any questions for Jessica?
This is Kendra. I do have a question, and this is for Jessica or anyone else in the group. Are you all aware if there is a national model for disability accessibility in transportation that you all use, Jessica, or that, something that we can use as a framework to inform our local accessibility initiatives?
I'm not familiar with anything that's specific. There's the National Center on Mobility Management, which does have more information. And they do fund grants that are for providers who help vulnerable populations. And there is the NADTC, which is for the older population. But I personally am not, as of yet, familiar with anything that is a national model.
Okay, thank you. And I guess I was just asking that question because, other organizations like Mark, they're, always working on these initiatives, and I didn't know if there was like one consistent model that could be applied both in rural and city transit that they could like use as a good model. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that would be really interesting. Michelle, I don't know if you have any input. You are much more familiar with most of this. So if you have anything.
I don't, there's not a national model per se. I mean, there's different types of transit that can operate in any area, but since areas are just so different and the needs of the people that live there are different, although maybe consistent, there's not a model per se for that, if that makes sense. I mean, there's a lot of resources, but there's not really a model that we work off other than the types of transportation that are available. And that's always changing, because now It used to just be demand response for rural areas, but now you can do microtransit, which is more like Uber or Lyft. So there's a lot of different options for things, and it just keeps changing. So you're really kind of not tied to anything. And that's kind of the good thing, is that you can make up pretty much whatever you want and operate it pretty much however you need to for your community.
Hey, Jessica, it's Greg again. You emphasized trainings for equity and inclusion and things of that nature. Do you know of any trainings or people who present on that currently?
I know of some in my area, but I can look to see if there's any like nationwide or statewide, any resources that might be open to everyone. I know a lot of employers, their HR department likes to do it themselves, but that is more of a growing trend. So I know not everyone does it yet, but I can look for some resources and send them to you if I can find any.
Great, thank you. Does anyone else have questions for Jessica? Okay, if not, great. We'll go ahead and move on with the agenda that I should have in front of me, but I don't. So hold on just a moment. All right. So I don't know if Craig is with us. I don't see him. I was hoping he would be here because I wanted to kind of to coin a phrase, circle back around to the weekend and evening transportation issues that we're having, and or the lack thereof. I had kind of drafted a letter. I wasn't sure how to go about addressing the issue really, and I was thinking about sending it to our transportation representatives at the state level. Michelle kind of helped me out with that though. Michelle, if you could chime in, I'd appreciate it. Something about the funding is really kind of lacking at the local level. Is that correct?
That is correct. So each project that you take on for public transportation so for example, OCCK here in Salina runs City Go fixed route within the city of Salina. So a big portion of their funding comes through KDOT, Kansas Department of Transportation. So each public transportation project that goes through KDOT is responsible for a local match. And it's generally 30% local match. So 30% of your total budget needs to come from local sources. And so a lot of times that is kind of a holdup on establishing new projects, because you've got to have that local support and that local buy-in in order to have a project exist.
Okay. Do you have a suggestion, Michelle, about how we could go about maybe advocating on a local level, and to whom? I'm guessing it would be to those transportation companies in one's individual area, but what could be done as far as, just like I said, local advocacy?
Sure. So that would be a good first step. So first identifying your need, which you've kind of already done, which is weekend and evening transportation, which a lot of agencies know that. I mean, they know that their hours are limited and that people need to get places after that. But there's, limited staffing in places. There's limited funding, obviously. So first step, identify your need. Second step, maybe gather a committee, talk about the need, talk about possible solutions, So it may or may not need to go through the transportation agency in your region. If there's another agency that could help out doing some rides, you know, a lot of places have vehicles, like churches, for example, have vehicles that sit a lot of the time, except for maybe, you know, Wednesday nights or Sundays when they're using those to pick up people. So are those options that you could use to serve people in other times? You know, social service agencies have vehicles that they use to serve their people. Is that something that you could work on? So if you're able to bring a group of people together, kind of look at, you know, maybe obvious solutions, but maybe those out of the box ideas as well. Maybe try to come up with some solutions that way. You know, is it possible that you could bring in an Uber or Lyft type scenario into your community? There are some becoming more prevalent, some rural options for that. So you can kind of just look at all those different things. You know, do you need to have a volunteer driver program in your area? Is that something that your senior center can help with? There's just a lot of different things that you can look at and, you know, especially do that out of the box thinking.
Cool. Very good. Good suggestions there. Sounds like probably some topics of conversation for SPILs and their local advocacy groups. And we'll make note of that. I may email with you some more about this, Michelle, and maybe get some ideas about how to word letters and things like that.
Sure, that sounds fine.
Great. And then I'll just I'll share it with the rest of the group via email. Let's see here. Kendra, I'm glad you're here because I wanted to ask you about the invitation to update the regional safety plan and the Casey Regional Transportation Alliance. Was that something that you were involved in? For some reason in my notes I had that you were involved in those things, but I may be wrong.
Sure, no. If I am recalling correctly, I believe that some of my colleagues have been.
Okay.
I know there's been several meetings that have been taking place around the region to update those things. I know that a few of my colleagues did attend, and actually, I think I did attend 1 or 2 meetings so far. So yes, I've been a part of that process.
Has there been anything of note come out of those meetings that you're
Well,
aware of?
Sure. So I think there's just been a lot of brainstorming so far, based on the last meeting that I attended, but I can tell you all that I was one of the few disability advocates on those calls. And so, you know, participation is really huge. They really need to hear our voice. I was able to elevate some issues for people with disabilities that we serve that they hadn't even thought about.
Awesome.
So yeah, I think participation in those, it should definitely be a priority right now, especially even when it comes to like emergency preparedness. That's something that we've also been working on as well. So
yeah, I hadn't had a chance to attend any of those that are taking place here in Kansas. I'm not sure that there are any more. Does anyone else have any information on that?
Greg, I think there's supposed to be one at the end of the month. I could be wrong about that. I had something else come up, and so I'm not able to attend anymore, but you might just double check.
I think I will do that. I think they have been in person, but I think they're doing Zoom now, aren't they?
Last I heard it was in person, so if they're doing Zoom, that's great.
All right. Okay, so is there any open discussion of any other transportation issues or topics that anyone has? That silence is loud. But okay, no, and that's fine. I think we have our plates full anyway. I want to go ahead and like I said, I'll get with Michelle more on the the evening and weekend transportation issue. Christina and I have gotten a couple of really, I think, impressive presenter potentials lined up for next year, this being our last meeting of the year. So I think we got that pretty well covered. If not, I'll probably reach out to Michelle about the other two mobility managers, because you guys present really well and your topics, as always, are really relevant. Of course, our objectives have been posted on our website. And did everyone get the meeting agenda that I sent out?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So the dates next year, of course, is January 11th, April 12th, July 12th, and October 11th.